gonna go.
Okay, hold on.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Committee of the Whole work session today, Tuesday, October 17th at 10:30. And on our agenda this morning, we have our minutes both from August and September. And then item B, we're very anxious to hear from Jason Hale today on an update from the HRA regarding potential housing site opportunities. Good morning, Jason. All right. So would you like Jana to pull up the information on the screen? And maybe Jana, if you could pull up in particular the map.
Oh, was there consent items or something, or are we jumping right through?
We're jumping right in.
At the committee of the whole, there are no action items.
Right.
Correct, right. Sorry, obviously I haven't had my coffee enough this morning.
Here.
I can add to it.
Great. Appreciate that. Very generous.
Give
So-
me a minute, yeah, if you want.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, you guys, you can start talking, but it might take you.
To pull it up on the screen here.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, I'm familiar, you can look at it, thank you, and you appreciate that. So do folks have it generally in front of them?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is with regard to property that the county owns just north of the ball fields on Creechville Road, the north boundary being Gunpowder Trail. And so this is generally a larger conversation about the limited resources vis-a-vis land that we have available, that it's not wonderful forests and public land in our county, which is a big reason why a lot of people enjoy being here, myself included, but also restricts what's actually available. So one of the things I did when I first came here, of course, was start looking at potential opportunities for land. And I'm continuing to do that because without land, there's no project. And so the reality is that the property dictates the project scope and location and access to utilities, et cetera. So I was talking with Administrator Yorkie months ago, I think, about this, and kind of looking at this particular site. There was some conversation with maybe the school district about opportunities for the ball fields, and so the HRA, we've ordered a wetland delineation for this property because, again, what we've learned is you don't know. Even if there's a big chunk, you don't know what you can do until you have the wetlands, because if it's not built on here, the odds are there's either a big boulder in it or it's wet. I've learned that very quickly. Or both.
Both.
Both. This is quite common. So so this is just really a conversation starter. Like, we could get the wetland delineation back next week and it could be like, oh, it's a swamp. Okay, well, never mind. But this is just part of our due diligence exploring what options might there be. Especially for places like this. From my perspective, it's really close to the school. Utilities are not far away. There's access off of Creechville, so you don't have to cut into Gunflint. You can go off of that quieter road. For a lot of reasons, maybe it makes sense. And again, actually, I started looking at this with a developer for a workforce housing program. But we've got, as you can see in your map, there's that sort of blue shading. Well, gray for you, it's all gray, sorry, Jamie.
It's all gray.
This piece, that according to hydrology maps, that is suspected to be wet. Again, you don't really know until you actually did the delineation. But knowing that, there's about call it a 1.5, 1 3/4 acre strip there that I sort of highlighted in gray that may be buildable. And so, maybe it isn't a multifamily apartment. Maybe it's an opportunity to do some small infill housing, single family homes. Really, I'm just trying to isolate what properties may be available in the community, especially on utilities. As you know, that gets very difficult when you get outside of city limits. I'm still working on those. In fact, yesterday, our HRA issued an RFP for a property in Schroeder on Kramer Road that we have access to from Minnesota Power, 40 acres there. So we are trying to figure out ways to do it outside of Grand Marais, of course. But the biggest opportunities for infill, especially smaller scale projects, are going to be here in town. So you can do one house on utilities and not spend $100,000 on the infrastructure, ideally. Theoretically. So that this is again just an open conversation starter. I will send the board the delineation when I get back, so the county can have that, just so you have it. And it's going to be for that whole highlighted about 5 acre chunk, and you can do with what you will with that. But Any questions about conceptually this at all?
Before Sarah leaves.
I'm using the restroom.
Oh.
I'll be back in 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to wait?
I thought it was delineated already.
There was evidence that there was a delineation in the past on that site from the delineator we hired, but those expire, and so we wanted to get an updated one.
Mhm.
The other thing is, as construction has happened on the Gunflint, we saw this on the half moon shape that the ADJOURNMENT has that project in, that the hydrology has changed over time too. Even from the delineation we got for the school property, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, there was some done there, and it's changed somewhat there too. So anytime you go up gradient and you're doing work, of course, and you change impervious surface, it changes pathways, et cetera. So we thought it was probably prudent before the, and actually, so, sorry, I'll back up 1 second. Delineations are an example of pre-development costs that are really, one, necessary to know what we're talking about to do this work, and two, very hard to get the funds for. So we're actually very grateful. We're going to the EDA tonight to request it, and they've offered to talk about pre-development funding to give us a little chunk to do things like this. But this, we're getting the field map for this done. We're breaking it into 2 chunks. So we're just paying for the field work to see, but without submitting the full report, because that's extra expense. If the field work comes back and it's all a swamp, then we're not going to continue that process. But anyway, sorry, Commissioner, yes, the short answer is there was one done. We needed to update it, and now we'll see. Next week, I think we get it back. What it looks like today. Yeah.
Sarah, I just was mentioning, no, not at all. I was just mentioning that I thought there was a delineation done already, and Jason said yes, there was, but it's probably expired by this time, and also hydrology changes based on the uphill projects, which makes sense. The other thing I just wanted to point out is this site has 3 other, dreams, the first of which is the ball field concept, and I think that's been kicked around for a while, and it doesn't have as much momentum now, especially, and it didn't back when it was first kicked around because of the extreme cost for leveling and site prep for a ball field. The other 2 would be the pilot disc golf course.
Oh, I hadn't heard of that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my understanding is it's pretty temporary. It's just to illustrate or demonstrate what disc golf is, because that's part of the Sawtooth Bluffs plan, park plan. But then the other competing interest maybe is a bike skills park, which was talked about and supported by the Parks and Trails Commission. And I think there's some temporary stuff going on in the hockey rink, but it's mobile, and the forever home was hoped to be there.
Single track skills park, is there talking about, Commissioner, like for mountain biking to?
It's like a pump track.
Pump track.
Oh, okay.
So, and my understanding is they can work with hydrology
Sure. Yep.
versus
Yep.
foundations or whatnot. So just so you're aware of that, it's very hard to prioritize anything about housing right now,
Understood.
but there are other interests. So just
Thank you. I knew of one of them. I knew of the, exactly, yeah. And maybe it turns out as we get the delineation back that, I mean, the ballpark might be infeasible anyway, because it's going to take a big chunk of that space, and it's half wetlands. But the other 2, maybe there's a viable path there. And again, I'm kind of isolated this one spot because I'm, constantly looking at, thank you MIS for the GIS system. I use it every day, all the time. But it might not, maybe this isn't the best fit. It's a larger conversation though about what property do we have, where can we isolate opportunities. The HRA can be a partner in that, and getting some of the due diligence done, and then saying, hey, this looks to be dry enough or close enough to XYZ utilities or whatever it is. And if it's not the site, fine. But at least I wanted to start with this. And it may be the case, the pilot project we're talking about for the disc golf. I mean, so the project that originally had led me to look at this site, we've decided to pursue another one because this didn't fit the vision they had for the space. They want to really maximize the 5 acres, and it looks like that's probably not possible. So there's no pressing or urgent need on this site. But it just opens the question, and again, if the disc golf wants to do something there as a temporary pilot, maybe that's totally fine if this gets used for housing in a few years. It takes a long time to queue up these things anyway. Do you have a sense for the timing on that pilot project?
Time's an illusion.
Do you have a sense for the construct of time that we employ? Any sense?
Well, no.
No, okay.
No, I think they were still hoping to get out there for the disc golf
Mhm.
and to start flagging stuff and walking it. And I think Mitch Travis is
Okay.
involved in that, so what a great resource across the board there.
Mhm.
Do you know?
Was not aware that they were looking at implementing that. I had not been advised of that, so I had just heard that that was a site that was of interest.
The other thought I also had is that they may not be mutually exclusive for any of these projects. So
Mhm.
I really appreciate you looking at options and opportunities.
Well, and I would say that we know that housing is a priority.
Mhm.
And so if this in fact is a place that's feasible for housing, I would think all the people that are interested in this parcel would believe that housing is a priority.
And Jason, just because, we're doing wetland mitigation and it's wetlands,
Mhm.
is the buying wetlands credits. And we've got a couple of options already in wetlands that are licensed or certified, however.
Mhm. The wetland banks?
Yes,
Mhm.
and so we already have enough to cover that in this. I know there are other qualifications for the type that you were replacing, but
Yep.
it's just because it's wetlands doesn't mean that we're not building on it.
Agreed,
And
thank you
just
for sure.
because there are boulders the size of Volkswagens or just a field of boulders, there's a lot of heavy equipment in this county.
Yes, there is.
And so it's
dynamite.
not an
Yeah.
issue. It's not an issue. It's a cost, it's a time thing, it's an expense. But have bulldozer will travel. I mean, it can be done.
I appreciate that, well put. One of the challenges is trying to pick our battles. So, by way of example, the school board property that I'm still in conversation with them about is 27 acres, and if we have to buy wetland credits, and there are a finite amount of wetlands in the, I know Charlie Lavoda has one, and actually he worked with the developers for the Switchback Village, so they bought credits through his bank. But there's a finite amount that he has in the bank, and so I'm trying to think, okay, if we have to use those up, where are we gonna get the most bang for our buck, so to speak. And again, the part that I shaded on this particular map is to say, even if it's just that strip that's not a wetland, or there's maybe minor wetlands on it, there might be a way to parcel that out or plat it such you can still get 10 homes or something like that, right? Right off of Creechville Road there. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
I was just saying, I mean, you look at that, it's a relatively narrow parcel that we're looking at next to the suspected wetlands, but what a perfect place for tiny homes or a small group of townhomes, maybe a small apartment building, but it's a very usable strip, and it's so walkable to the hospital, to the county,
Right.
to the school district. It makes so much sense to do something like that there.
And in particular, I 100% agree, in particular, thinking about the pedestrian walkway that's planned for the south side of the Gunflint. Like, one of the challenges with Switchback Village, of course, is getting pedestrians through that space, and we have some ideas on how to do that. But this is not an issue, because they're already on the south side of the road, and they can walk to, like you said, employment or the county. There could be people walk to work from at the county. It's just a couple blocks away. So to your point, Commissioner Mills, I think that it's not an either or potentially. If we identify a dry enough strip, there should be enough place. Maybe there is a bike park, has skills in the back. There's plenty of room there. And it's just identifying along Creechville where I think utilities are actually up at Gunflint, so we have to bring them down. But and again, this all comes down to math, how many units do you need to make it worth bringing utilities to all of that? But it looks like there might be enough space to make it make sense. And one of the roles we can play as the HRA is to assemble, prep, and then make the site available for infill housing. For example, folks like Hamilton Habitat who are trying to build affordable housing, getting land, Anna will tell you, is the hardest thing for them to do. They have 2 projects underway now, 2 houses right next to each other, but the land cost was $80,000 and the utilities were $80,000. So it's $160,000 just before they put a shovel in the ground to build the house. So this is one way in which we can start setting table to reduce those costs and try, God willing, rates don't keep going up, try to make it possible for people to buy houses in the community. We're going to work here. So, any questions about that in general? If you have other ideas land-wise, I'm all ears. If you got a bank that I don't know about, the county has a secret stash of property you want to get rid of, I'd love to hear about it.
I think you and I spend a lot of time on GIS looking.
We do.
Oh, my. Well, thank you very much for this update and for moving forward with a wetland delineation. I think it's got lots of potential.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for hearing me out. And when I get that back, and if it looks like there's a, call it reasonable enough dry space to do something, I'll probably come back to the board and say, hey, this is what we know. Here's some concepts. What do we think about that? And then see where we go from there.
Sounds good.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jason. And you said something that triggered me, and that was the best bang for the buck.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to stir the pot, and maybe I do a little bit. My knee jerk is public housing. Trying to avoid situations that our community is struggling with right now with change in ownership and change in affordability. When we're talking long-term, if you've got a 30-year agreement, that still expires. You know, if you've got a 15-year agreement, that still expires. If it's public housing, it's owned by the community, and it doesn't expire. And so when we talk about our finite land, and we've talked about this before, so I apologize, but I feel like I need to continually bring it up in public meetings, but when we talk about our finite land, every time we do a project, it lessens the other potentials, right? And so every time we do a project with a private entity, it lessens the potential for the public and housing. And so I just wanted to express that, and maybe it's obvious, and as you've said before, we need to build stepping stones to be able to get there, and I appreciate that, but just recent concerns have brought that to front of mind again, as I'm sure they have with you too. So,
Yes.
That's all. Thank you for your work and your tolerance and your advocacy.
Absolutely. Actually, Commissioner Bill might have two quick points to respond to. Understood. And just a quick, without going too deep in the weeds, an update. I have been able to get in touch with Harborview folks, as part of the conversation. The owner there had a really productive conversation with them. So I'm not ruling out some opportunities there for us to get involved and help maintain, I hope, some affordability in that building long term. Too early to give details or to tell, but just the conversation's happening, and fortunately we have a little more time than we otherwise would because it's sold. So we had a bit of an 8-month head start, if you will. So parking that for a second, because you're very correct, that is very much top of mind right now. I've had, I don't know how many conversations in the last week about this. This property, let's just assume the one we're talking about, that it's big enough to do a multifamily building of some kind. I am not ruling out by any means looking at a tax credit application. So one of the nice things about more patient property owners like the county, who doesn't have a long-term solid commitment for this property yet, there's some exploratory things, right, you mentioned, is if we know that it's available, the utilities could work, and we know there's enough space to do something, then we have the time to go ahead and assemble an application for a long-term affordable project, like a new Birchwood or Harborview, whatever, pick one. This year, of course, we supported One Roof Community Housing's application, that was the sort of triage at the moment, was Birchwood, and it needed to happen. And we're pretty optimistic about it. Indications are good so far, but we'll know in a month and a half, for sure we'll know. So, having said that, the reason I mention it is because staging those applications is really important, because it's very, very uncommon to submit for the first time for a small scale project and get a yes. It's very uncommon. I've worked with One Roof on a project in Duluth, and they got 3 rounds of applying before they got, so it took 5 years before they got a shovel in the ground, more or less. So the reason I mention that is because as we identify some of these sites, if they're big enough, we can say, okay, what's the value here? What's the commitment? Let's start putting together some sort of tax credit application. And whether that's the HRA doing the application and owning as public housing, or we have a partner that helps it. There's a whole bunch of menu options there. But part of my job right now is trying to figure out where would these be best fit? Where are those sites? So all that's to say, definitely on my mind. Finite resources, finite time, finite capacity. how do we map that out? But I've got a whole bunch of irons and proverbial fires trying to figure that out right now. And because I know how long those take, trying to get some quick is very relative, faster than federal funding projects in the ground. But thank you for continuing to bring that up. I understand, and I'll keep considering it and trying to figure it out.
And thank you. I don't feel like I need to communicate that with you, right? Like you are a pro and a rock star and kind of strong community values. Even though you're new to our community, I feel like you understand our community and share those values. I just wanted to, again, like I say, bring it up at public meetings. There is a lot of talk about nobody's doing anything. Actually, they're doing it against us. And I just want to share, like, no, that's not our intention. We're trying to do what we can, and we have some tools, and we try to get more tools, and we try to build partnerships, and try to be strategic. And thank you for all of it.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
And that is indeed, I mean, that's the communications, because we just need to be repetitious in different formats. Another person will hear, another person will better understand or dispel what they thought they had heard a time before. And so they're asking the questions that we know the answers to has great value, great value. So we need to keep doing that. You need to keep answering the same questions over and over and over. But we're trying to help make it understandable because it's such a serious issue for our community.
Commissioner White, I will answer those all day long if it means telling the truth versus having rumors or misinformation spread.
Right,
I'm
because
happy
that's
to
your
do that.
job,
Yep.
and that's what we expect.
Yep, and I have answered a lot of the same questions many times, and I would way rather do that. So thank you again, Commissioner, for asking those, and so the public can hear from the horse's mouths, so to speak, what's going on. Yeah, didn't monopolize so much time, but is there anything else about this?
I don't believe so. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
we appreciate
you.
all
Use
you
in the
do.
back and park.
All right. Well, next on our agenda, we have a Community Center Strategic Planning Update, and Sarah Waddle is here with us this morning. Thank you, Sarah, for coming.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Well, I know that we sent out all of these documents in your agenda, but I just printed them because I thought, why not? So there's a printed copy of everything.
Nice. Thank you.
Pass those down.
Thank you.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, so I wanted to take time to come before all of you to talk about this because we've been working on strategic planning up at the community center for the last close to a year. We started in January with the community center board, and we thought it would be a good time to share what we've been working on with all of you as commissioners, and just for information and making sure that we're all kind of in the loop about what we've been working on, because I imagine there may be things down the line that come before you for decisions and that sort of thing. So having all of us on the same page from the get-go, I think will help with that. And when we embarked on writing a strategic plan, we dug back a bit into the community center archives and found lots of great information from various plans and directions things have gone over time, but not evidence that we saw of a strategic plan being written in the last decade or so. So it seemed like a good time to dust off, what are we doing and where are we going, and making sure we're all feeling connected and accountable to that. So we started by just pulling together a simple document showing what do we have and what do we do right now. So this first couple pages just outlines all of the facilities at the community center and gives a brief description of each of the programs. We separated them into the programs that are run by our staff, the programs that are run by community groups, but they happen at the community center, and then just showed some information about what office spaces we have and things like that. So this isn't something that we have to, it's not hidden, but it's not like an external communication piece per se. It's more so that when new board members come on, we can help orient them to what all we have. Commissioners can understand at a quick glance, what is this community center and what's going on there. New staff, all of those types of audiences. And then the next section of pages is the plan itself, but maybe I'll pause before we get into the plan and ask if you all had any questions about the listing of programs and facilities, or if anything was a surprise or of interest to you. Hopefully not for you, Stacy. You're in the thick of all this with us.
Well, one question I had,
Yeah.
you talked a little bit about the food business incubator program. I think
Yeah.
we're all familiar with that, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious, how many businesses have been using that program?
Yeah, so from the time I started, we realized we needed to shore up some of the structures around that program so that it was a little more clear, how many businesses we can accommodate, how long they can be in the program. Because it's a public facility, we can't have one business monopolize that forever. It has to be able to be open to new people coming in and going.
Mhm.
So in the course of doing that review of the program, the board updated the policies around it. So the new way that it works is that businesses can apply. We can accommodate 2 to 3 businesses at a time, really depending on their storage needs, because there's
Mhm.
very little storage
Yeah.
in the kitchen, and depending on what type of business they are, what they're doing, how loud it is, how many hours they need to be in there, all of that. Because we've also learned that in order to allow those businesses to use it, for the most part, there's enough sound travel between the kitchen and that community room space that we can't rent both at the same time. So we have to balance the demands for community meeting space with this kitchen program. So 2 to 3 businesses at a time, and they have a 2-year period to be a business in the program.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will say there's a major lack of permanent shared kitchen space in the community for businesses to go on to then use. So this is kind of a hanging out there question mark of how we could have a whole other meeting and conversation about that. That issue, and I think especially with the rise of food trucks, which didn't exist when this kitchen space became a shared kitchen space, depending on the configuration of a particular food truck, they can do more or less of their prep and cleanup in the truck itself, and so some of those businesses really have to rely on a long-term shared use kitchen space, which we don't have a lot to offer of around Cook County.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you, appreciate
Yeah.
that. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and that's I was gonna ask that maybe not very similar thread though,
Yeah.
about just the need for that more permanent
Yeah.
shared space, because it is an economic development issue too.
Absolutely.
And some of the pilot
Mhm.
food businesses have to scale back or shift, and that can be good and open more
Mhm.
opportunities too, but
Mhm.
I was curious about that, and just happy to hear that
Yeah.
the board is aware of that and thinking about
Absolutely.
it and.
Well, I think we're very acutely aware that the kitchen at the community center was built.
Yeah.
The community center is a curling club that is being used for many, many other things, and the kitchen was not purpose-built to be a shared use kitchen. So it's great we can use it in that way, but it has severe limitations too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Any other questions about the program? Okay. So as the community center board and I worked together on this, we had a few planning sessions early on in the year, and then our staff worked to draft and bring this back to the board a few times for review before they approved it this June. And we highlight in the plan a very succinct vision for the community center and a mission for what we do, so that we can match back all of our programming to that mission and allow us to have kind of a compass as new initiatives and ideas get brought to our staff to see if they fit into that mission and vision. And then there's 5 goals outlined in the plan, and they each have some objectives underneath them and more detail, but I'll just briefly talk about the 5 goals. That first one is about maintaining and improving our existing facilities. We really have an amazing set of facilities at the community center that have been developed over a long time, and we just recognize how much care and hard work has gone into building what we have, and the board really feels that it's a top priority to keep those facilities in high quality shape so they can be used into the future. So you'll notice it doesn't say in that goal, build a bunch of new things. And I think it's true that we feel like the space has really been developed in a great way, and it needs to be maintained and improved, the buildings and spaces that we have there already. The second goal is about strengthening our relationships with recreational and community groups and building new connections. So there are a lot of ongoing user groups that have long-term relationships with the community center. Some of those have really formalized relationships, some have very informal relationships. And one goal that we wanted to uplift is taking more care and attention to that partnership process, both so that we are all on the same page about what each party's responsibilities and roles are, but also so that we can, as a facility, support those groups that are partnering with us in different ways to help make their programming a success. The county would have to employ a lot more people if we were going to run these things ourselves. So it's really amazing that we have volunteer community groups that run all of these recreational outlets that are so important to the social fabric of the community. And so we want to focus on supporting those groups to be able to do what they're doing as best as they can. We also think it's important to assess and improve the few programs that we do run as our staff. So looking back at that facilities overview, you'll see that the programs that we run are things like the farmers market, the community garden, the summer youth volunteer program, that food incubator program. So really taking a look at each of those programs. We've started that with the food incubator program already, but taking a turn over the next few years to really assess each of those programs, evaluate their impact, and decide, whether things need to be laid down, new things added, how to improve the things that we are managing as a staff. And I think I want to highlight really that the goal that we have to be able to respond to community needs for new programming too. We would really like to strive for there to be space within our workloads and capacity to be able to say yes to some of the new ideas that come our way and be able to be seen as a responsive facility and organization to the community's desires. The fourth goal is about ensuring that our facilities and our programs are really accessible and inclusive and welcoming for all. As a public, building and campus, that's a really high priority for us and goal, and so you'll see some objectives outlined around that in the plan. And then the last goal is about improving our organizational structure, resource levels, and partnerships. So that talks about reviewing our staff roles, understanding, what is the lay of the land of all the programs and projects, and how are they divvied out, and do we have the capacity to do everything that we're trying to do? If we want to add new things, what will that take? Also shoring up and strengthening the role of the community center board with some really simple things like having an orientation for new board members, having a board member handbook, really allowing them to do their job effectively. And then some strategic partnerships that we want to make sure we're keeping an eye on with some of our other county service providers, and just ways to streamline some of those efforts and strengthen our partnerships in the community. The final thing that I printed was, so we took this plan and then we delineated it into sort of tasks or objectives that we'll have over the next 5 years. In your agenda packet, there's a link to like a big spreadsheet that shows all those. And then this written down just takes that spreadsheet and groups it by year, so we can as staff easily look and say, okay, this year, these are the ones that we were supposed to start taking a bite out of, and it will allow the board to hold us accountable to those at board meetings by checking in on these goals that we have for each year. So I wanted to just open it up for some discussion or questions and answers about the strategic plan and where we're headed as the community center with all of you.
Well, I just appreciate, first of all, the fact you, took all the information and by years set up different goals. I think it's really a good way to work with your board and, keep your eye on the progress that you anticipate making.
Yes.
And that you have steps along the way to achieving the whole plan. So I really, really like the way it's laid out.
Thank you.
My question would be now in year one, which is this year,
Yeah.
2023, of those points, how are you progressing with accomplishing those?
Yeah, well, the plan was just finalized this summer, so we're just this second half of the year going to be working on some of these, and we've begun work on several of these already. And I think this November, December time, when our programs have really quieted down, will be a great opportunity for us to take a bigger bite out of some of those goals that are written there. I think the dance with the capital improvement plan and how that plays out will sort of inform some of the work, especially around maintaining and improving facilities. And I think our job at the community center right now is just to make sure that all the information we can share has been shared about the facilities that we have, and just stay in the loop and keep, being ready to accept when there are opportunities for some of those projects to happen. Yeah.
The board member handbook, that sounds like a good thing to work on
Absolutely.
for the present members and
Yeah.
the future people.
Yeah, for sure. Which some of these documents would be included in, and then some other information about the board. Something else that we did was we put together just a calendar of the board meets 6 times a year, and just outlining, basic things that have to happen every year and which meetings they'll need to happen at, and to get some of that structure in place.
Other questions?
I don't have questions, but I just want to say I have absolutely loved being on this community center. So
Yeah.
thank you for letting me take
It
this
was
off.
a hard give, but I'm happy.
And
Yeah.
I'm just, I guess, surprised at how busy that place is.
Yeah.
Constantly. Now, one of our last meetings,
Yeah.
Leanne had put together keeping track of
Programs.
usage,
Yeah.
programming.
Oh, the facility rental report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I found very interesting, and I was thinking back to that building and its maintenance needs.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of surprised that it didn't rise higher on the level of buildings that we should be focusing on.
Hmm.
So the number of community members who use that building
Mm-hmm.
was surprising to me.
Hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to keep advocating that we need to make sure that maintenance gets done there.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see we might need to want to think about office space there. I mean, I can see some office space that could easily be moved up to a place where the community already is.
Mm-hmm.
So, just I'm going to advocate for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're back to talking new space, but I know.
Mm.
I said,
Oh, that's
but yeah.
That's interesting, like, my impression of the community center is the space is already overused, so there's not space to move into there, but what you're saying is it's so well used that it might be advantageous to have other office spaces there.
With some type of addition or remodel.
Right,
or-
right,
yeah.
No, not
gotcha,
you.
gotcha.
You
Not
could-
in the.
No, that's what I'm
That's what I
saying.
was like,
I guess I'm talking new space.
Oh, I see,
Yeah.
sorry.
If I didn't make that clear,
Yeah.
I meant to.
Yeah.
You probably
You know,
did.
maybe that
This
search and rescue building
Yeah.
doesn't need to be there.
Mm.
And
Mm.
there's so many options to think about.
Mhm. It's complicated. Yeah.
Complex. Other questions or comments? Well, we really appreciate you coming here and sharing this strategic plan with us. It's
Yeah,
been
you're welcome.
just really nice to look at, and we welcome you back to
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
update us.
Share again.
Absolutely. Commissioner
I have-
Mills.
I have something
I
else.
figured.
Anytime I get a chance, I wanted to thank you. I mean, Diane did such amazing work there and such shoes to fill. And you're not filling in the same way that she filled hers, but in another way, but the work that you're doing is just outstanding. I've seen so many improvements on a variety of different fronts, and Leanne's work as well. What a boon for our community. Thank you for your leadership and your cooperation and your example and everything.
All right, well, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming this morning.
Mhm.
All right, well, the next item on our agenda, I see Rowan Watkins is waiting in the wings, is some information related to cybersecurity. He's going to be providing us a briefing.
So, and we need to close this session
Yes,
to receive
yes.
this information.
So, and because of that, and it is stated on here that due to the sensitive nature of the information to be presented by Rowan, we're going to close session as allowed by Minnesota statute 13D.05 subdivision 3. So we are closed at this time and will be So our regular meeting of the Cook County Board of, our regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole is returning from a closed session. It is 12:17 on October 17th. And so we're now towards the bottom of our agenda. We have minutes of our standing committees. We've got Personnel, Highway, and the draft minutes for the Airport Advisory Commission. And with that, we are adjourned.